Ordinance. Okay. Ordinance 2515-18 and ordinance 2516-18, deferred second reading and hearing on ordinances. The second deferral, isn't it?
It is.
We can't seem to get the notice proper on
It's
this
a
one.
notice issue again?
Yep.
The paper failed to
The next
publish.
items on the agenda concern ordinances 2515-18 and 2516-18, which were adopted on first reading by the Township Committee on October 16th. Both ordinances are in reference to acquisition of drainage easements, interest, as well as temporary construction easements in portions of properties located in the township on Horan Circle, on which to locate pipes and related flood control equipment underground. The installation of the pipes and equipment will allow the existing Gilbert Place stormwater pumping station to handle a higher volume of stormwater. Due to the item of Millburn and Short Hill's error in not publishing the public hearing notices as directed, the second reading and public hearings on these ordinances will not be considered this evening. The publication notice will be placed in the December 6th item stating that the ordinances will be taken up on second reading and for the hearings to take place at the next regular Township Committee meeting scheduled for December 18th. May I have a motion to defer the public hearings of ordinances 2515-18 and 2516-18 to the December 18th Township Committee meeting, which begins at 7:30 p.m.
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
May I roll call vote, please?
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Del Eglo?
Yes.
Mayor Bursky?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. I am going to introduce ordinance 2520-18, procedure for introducing an ordinance on first reading. I'd like to present an ordinance entitled Township of Millburn, ordinance number 2520-18, ordinance amending chapter 7, traffic of the revised general ordinances of the Township of Millburn. The proposed amendment to the traffic ordinance is intended to amend Chapter 7, traffic, as necessary to update traffic regulations for conformity throughout the section, and to modify the parking and traffic regulations imposed throughout the township. Specifically, the ordinance modifies time limit restrictions on certain streets, clarifies parking meter zones, modifies where on-street parking permit is required, modifies where parking is prohibited and what time, and creates residential parking zones and permitting requirements. Further, the ordinance inserts the locations of mid-block crossings, adds an area where trucks are excluded over a designated weight, adds a location where turning on red is prohibited, adds locations deemed as loading zones, updates the location of bus stops, and modifies the parking restrictions and designation of township or Board of Ed parking lots. Additionally, the ordinance updates the storage charge associated with towing a vehicle, modifies the permitting fee section, and modifies where parking is prohibited at the Essex Street Police Station driveways. I move that this ordinance be taken up and passed on first reading, and that the township clerk be authorized to have the ordinance published in accordance with the law in the item and for hearing and final passage on Tuesday, December 18th, 2018. May I have a second?
Second.
May I have a vote, please?
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Del Eglo?
Yes.
Mayor Bursky?
Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Rosenberg?
I would like to present an ordinance entitled Township of Millburn, ordinance number 2521-18, ordinance amending and supplementing Chapter 7 Traffic, Section 720, stop intersections of the revised general ordinances of the Township of Millburn. This proposed amendment is to have an always stop at the intersection of Highland and Hobart Avenues. This always stop has been recommended by the Township of Millburn's traffic consultant, Mazer Consulting. Now, this has come up, been asked by residents, and then there was a meeting at the Bauer Center with some residents, whereas some research was being done by our traffic engineer. We recently, an opinion was issued by Maurice Rached of Mazer that based on a full investigation of circumstances relative to vehicular safety, he recommends an always stop control at this intersection. The only way for us to do this is by ordinance. He says that it's warranted and justified based on multi-way stop applications in the manual and uniform traffic control devices. Says it's justified by sight distance deficiency for vehicles traveling on Hobart Avenue. It will eliminate the need for intersection sight distance and will enhance vehicular safety. Enhanced warning signs and pavement markings will be installed on Highland Avenue to alert drivers of the new control, and there will also be pavement markings and regulatory warning signs. So this was the recommendation. At this point, we're just calling it for a first reading.
Right, and there'll be a public hearing when you announce it.
I move that this ordinance be taken up and passed on first reading, and that the township clerk be authorized to have the ordinance published in accordance with the law in the item, and for hearing on final passage on Tuesday, December 18th, 2018.
May I have a second?
Second.
May I have a vote, please?
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberman?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Paul Eglo?
Yes.
Mayor Bursting?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Levy?
2522-18, we should have Dr. Eisenstein here to present this, but it is an ordinance to provide for the partial amendment, supplementation, and revision of Chapter 4, the revised interordinance of the Township of Millburn with addition of a new Section 4-2 entitled Right-of-Way Permits. Those in the audience who heard Dr. Eisenstein will note that the FCC just passed the Accelerating Wireless Broadband Deployment by Removing Barriers to Infrastructure Investment rule. Docket number is 17-79. What does that mean? It allows new poles and ground level cabinets, among other things, in the municipal right-of-way to raise significant aesthetic and safety concerns. This ordinance gives Millburn the fluid ability to make quick decisions, as Dr. Eisenstein noted, because putting through 5G, both macro and micro antenna, plural, requires Millburn to be sufficiently in a position to approve it, based aesthetically and on performance. The purpose of the ordinance is to provide for reasonable regulations concerning the placement of these wireless facilities within the township, consistent with the state and federal law, through the implementation of a right-of-way permit procedure. Most of this ordinance is technical, as a lot of it was explained by Dr. Eisenstein. I move the ordinance be taken up and passed on first reading, and that the township clerk be authorized to have the ordinance published in accordance with law in the item. Hopefully it gets it correct. And for hearing and final passage on Tuesday, December 18, 2018.
May I have a second?
Second.
May I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberman?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Paul Eglo?
Yes.
Mayor Bursting?
Yes.
Thank you.
Does any committee member have an item of old business they want to address?
Yes. Where do we stand on the Canoe Brook kennel?
Can't tell you about the kennel. I can tell you that the rights to the road have been acquired from the Canoe Brook Country Club and from the Jersey American Water Company, and the deeds have been recorded, so I guess the table is set for a decision to be made as to what will be done there to construct the facility in that road bed.
Right, so I think what the township committee will have to be discussing next year, among other things, is what they want to put there. Because it may not make sense to put an animal shelter, and it may make more sense to use another township's animal shelter and to put something else there. So I think that is something, but I think we're gonna take up the road, right?
The idea would be to make it impassable, correct?
Right.
There will not be a passable road, correct?
Correct.
Well, it can't be passable because there's a contract with a developer, which language I changed, that renders it not passable. And you can't change it by ordinance or deed transfer either, based on the language in the agreement, otherwise the developer's in default. So we can validate that by putting something there, by putting a building there, but it's already confirmed.
Well, whether it's a building or a park, some green space, a dog park, whatever the committee decides they want to do with it next year, I think it's something that we can discuss, or I would recommend discussing it early
I
next
think
year.
we discussed, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I have a question. Who pays for that? Was that in agreement, was that something that was negotiated with Matt Calley? No? So,
It will pay for whatever goes there.
So we pay for it?
Yes.
And I believe we discussed that having a permanent structure could possibly impede emergency vehicles if there was flooding. So there will be something there, but it might not be a brick building from edge to edge.
Well, again, I think that's something
Right.
that the committee.
Will you discuss?
Yeah,
But we
should
have to
discuss,
take that into consideration.
All things.
Of
sure.
course.
Right. Any other old business? Okay, I believe Ms. Lieberberg has some new business.
Yes, it has come to my attention that there are multiple private homes in our township that are listed on Airbnb and VRBO for short-term rentals. A basement, a spare bedroom. In fact, as of last Friday, there were 23 listings with a zip code of 07041. I would like to look into and propose for potential consideration an ordinance that would eliminate short-term rentals, less than 30 days in our community. I personally don't believe these short-term rentals belong in our neighborhood, but I would certainly like to discuss this with my fellow committee members. Safety, noise, garbage removal, and overall community wellness. And I just want to clarify that I'm not talking about individuals that are renovating a home and in need of a short-term rental. My concern is the odd weekend or weekday guest when a neighbor rents out their basement or the spare room. And during my attendance at the New Jersey League of Municipalities, there was a vendor there that monitors these listings on numerous websites that can assist the township from knowledge and potential enforcement for violations. I've asked Alex and our administration to look into some of these viable options for monitoring, and I'd like to bring this back around for both committee and community discussion in early 2019, when I have more data. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other new business?
Well, just a comment on that. Somebody in the public reported to me on Sunday evening there were only 6 listings combined on VRBO and Airbnb, sticking in both zip codes, both Millburn zip codes.
Well,
Now, I didn't undertake that research myself. It was reported to me, and I don't vouch for the accuracy of it.
well, actually, this was not, when I wrote my notes, it was not this past Friday, it was the Friday before, so I will
So
stand
Sunday
correct-
evening there were 6 according to this searcher.
So this was, well, this was the Friday before, so prime time for a weekend rental.
Thanksgiving.
I think also, just to be clear, that the site that they're that Ms. Lieberberg was speaking about actually takes from 50 plus short-term rental sites, whether it's surf couch surfer, things like that.
So it's an
So
aggregate,
it might be
it's not just
Okay.
Airbnb, VRBO, and it's,
All right, well, that's not how it was presented.
Sorry.
Okay.
Township Committee took this up several years ago. I have a file on ordinances that other places have adopted, and at least as of that date, I can share that with the.
great.
I think that's a great idea. Okay.
I have an item of new business.
Yes, ma'am.
Mayor, I propose that the Township Committee adopt by ordinance a municipal ethics board tasked with promulgating a municipal code of ethics. In New Jersey, in order to promote confidence in the legal system, we have the Office of Attorney Ethics, which has local ethics boards populated by volunteers who are responsible for investigating claims of ethics violations. Similarly, the New Jersey state statute governing the municipal law expressly permits formation of a municipal ethics board. Based on my research and consulting with our attorney, our municipality has never considered nor implemented forming one. Yet in my term, I've become aware of the following conduct by local government officers: Facebook and other social media violations, using emails of township employees for political purposes, elected officials using offensive language in public, threatening volunteer members of boards. So I think that such a body would promulgate a municipal code of ethics for all local government officers and employees, and this board would have the power to investigate violations, issue subpoenas, impose penalties, and forward referrals to the county prosecutor and attorney general. Members of this board shall be chosen based on their reputation for integrity and knowledge of government affairs. And interestingly, under the state statute, of the 6 members that would populate such a committee, the law provides that no more than 3 members should be of the same political party. So now that you'll have a township committee comprised of 5 members of the same political party, I ask the committee to consider this formation. And I expect that the new committee will, that this committee will discuss, and I'd like to hear, at least by the next meeting, what your thoughts on. And failing to hear any follow-up on this would just make me question why a committee wouldn't be committed to ethics and promotion of making sure we have some oversight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other new business? Okay. Public discussion, when invited to speak, please come to the lectern, state your name and address, and speak into the podium microphone so your comments can be understood by all and properly recorded. If you are reading from a prepared statement, please give a copy or email a copy. Give a copy to Christine or email it to her at cgatti, C-G-A-T-T-I, at millburntwp.org. Please do not speak for longer than 3 minutes. We will not use the timer unless, the timing clock, unless the limitation is being abused. Thank you.
Millie Lee, 21 Wells Lane. I sent you guys an email on Sunday. I just want to make sure you guys have received it and read it.
Yes.
Great, thank you. So I'm here to talk about the introduction, the ordinance introduction 2521-18, the Highland and Hobart intersection four-way stop. First of all, before I proceed, I just want to say that I know that you guys have a really tough job, so I'm going to try to be nice tonight. You know, I know that that intersection's very complicated, and that situation's, you know, very complex. And, you know, as I spoke with Alex McDonald earlier today, and, you know, that's a very well-traveled intersection. So I sent you guys an email, I think it was on Sunday, and I wanted to let you know my position has not changed. And I wanted to give you an update based on what's happened since then. So yesterday morning, on Monday, I was informed that the data analysis would be complete by the end of the day on Monday. And then on today, this afternoon at 2:30, I met with Alex McDonald and your town engineer for over an hour to discuss their analysis and their findings. And I was not comfortable with the findings, and more importantly, the Maser results, I was not comfortable with it. They sourced their information from Alex McDonald and the town engineer. And the reason why I wasn't comfortable with it was, first of all, the analysis is incomplete. A very key component to the analysis was incomplete. And second, they used irrelevant data in the findings. So I'm going to elaborate on that. So I was here in September, and I advocated to take a very measured approach in trying to figure out this situation. And so, and I still believe that, you know, like if it is that we need to to put in a four-way stop, then, you know, and if there's no other options, then, you know, let's do that. But let's just take a measured approach and see how things progress, right? So in May or June, they put in a blinking stop sign. In at the end of September, they cut back 2 trees and the shrubbery on the Hobart side, right? So it's on the eastbound on the Hobart side, going from, let's just say, the train station to the middle school. The other fact you should know is that, according to Mr. McDonald, the place where they have all the accidents is sourced from that side, right? So it's the issues with the visibility on the eastbound side on Hobart. So that's where most of the accidents occur. So you know, they're already jumping. They've made these changes at the end of September, so therefore they're already making these assumptions based on data, insufficient data, right? So, you know, I asked Mr. McDonald today, well, how many accidents have you guys had this year? They don't know. How many accidents have you had since, you know, you put in the flashing red light? We don't know. How many accidents have you had since you cut back the trees and shrubbery? We don't know. And the ironic thing is that I asked them, well, how do you think the blinking stop signs are working? Then they said, well, we need 12 months of data before we can tell you if it's working. Even today, I talked to Mr. McDonald, and he said, he himself told me, well, we need at least 3 months of data in order to make any kind of assessment. Well, they cut back the shrubbery and cut down 2 trees in September. How can they make any kind of assessment? It hasn't even been 3 months yet. The other thing I pointed out was that the 2 big problems over there at the intersection is that lack of visibility right there on the eastbound side on Hobart. The other problem is with speed, right? So I said Mr. McDonald's analysis was flawed because they didn't look at the speed. They did not do a speed study whatsoever going down Highland, so that Mazer's assessment doesn't incorporate that element. All they did was do a traffic study to see, will the traffic flow back into Wells Lane? Well, one of the things that Maurice, who is the consultant you guys use, told us at the October meeting, which is the second meeting, was that they've looked into putting 4-way stops there before, and they didn't do that. And the reason why they didn't do that is because, first, there's a real risk of rear-end collision there, right? So when the roads are wet and icy, if you know the way the road is over there, there's a curve, there's a bend, and there's a slope. It goes down. So you have a very limited line of sight there. And you can't really see that until you're very close to the intersection. And then you're on a slope, so it's hard to stop. So that's why they didn't look at it before. They didn't consider it before, because the risk of rear-end injury is very real. And then he also mentioned during our meeting is that, putting a stop sign there would be against federal guidelines. And so he now says, oh, well, I sign off on it. Well, that's because he's using wrong data. He's looking at accidents from prior years. We've made improvements, we as in him, we've made improvements, substantial improvements since then. One big source of the problem was those trees and the limited visibility on that eastbound side, and they didn't look at it. Anyway, so one thing I do want to complain about is the process. This whole process has been very not transparent, it's not been collaborative, and it's been very hurried and not above the board. I'm not saying to not pass this at all. I'm just saying, let's table the issue, let's wait till we get some real data and know what we're dealing with, because right now, all the data we have is from 2017 or whatever previous years. I don't know. In our October meeting, we were told that, October meeting as in the second meeting, we met with the experts. We gave them our contact info. They said they were going to crunch through the numbers and get back to us and get our feedback. You know what? That feedback loop didn't happen. And they went, and what's even more disturbing is that this introduction of the ordinance was done even before the analysis was crunched. I mentioned to you guys that that the town engineer was still crunching the numbers yesterday. This was put on the agenda last week. It just doesn't seem right to me. It doesn't smell right. It seems like you introduce the ordinance before the findings. Something doesn't seem above board. And yes, it's true that Mr. McDonald was nice enough to meet with me today, but there's I have a whole bunch of neighbors who are very interested in this topic as well. And there wasn't, they didn't put together the right forum to communicate the results to them. And I was told yesterday that I could meet with them today. I just don't understand, this whole lack of due process. There's been no notification that this is going to be on the agenda. They have all the interested parties' contact info. At that October meeting, we gave everybody our contact info. They were supposed to tell us, what's going on. I think they have not been courteous to the residents who are interested in this, and they haven't explained to the residents what the data really is. They showed it to me. Fortunately, I'm fairly good with data, so I was able to pick out these small key facts that may change Mazur's assessment. This whole thing has been very hurried. Like, even today, I was talking to the town engineer. She said, I was rushing to finish the traffic study. I don't even know the number of accidents year to date. Let's see, what else? Oh, yes, the other thing I was going to say is, it seems like this was snuck in during the holiday season. I miss my kid's holiday concert to be here. I have two other neighbors who wanted to be here, but one of them had a company holiday party. Then the other one had like some soccer banquet, holiday banquet. So this is a bad timing on wrong data. I think that this is hurried. So anyways, I just really want you guys to have a well thought out plan, not waste the taxpayers' money, and not create other safety hazards. And I am still requesting to form an ad hoc committee for the Short Hills train station.
Thank you.
Mayor, may I ask a question, please? Why is this going through on the second read in 2 weeks instead of normal and customary 1 month differential? Okay, glad I asked. Good question.
Why is it going? Because if we're going to deal with it, it has to be this year. Because we can't carry ordinances from one committee to another committee. So if we're going to deal with it, it'll be this year. If we decide not to deal with it, then it'll be tabled until next year's committee.
So would we choose to table it after we have public comment? Because what if people also
Yeah,
can't
no,
come
well,
on December 18th?
We'll hear public comment. Let's finish public comment. We'll close public comment, and then if we want to address this, we can. But I'd rather just have public comment finished
Okay,
first.
but it's important to let these
Understood.
people know they should have to get here December 18th.
Right, so if we're going to move forward with this ordinance, okay, the second reading will be December 18th, and that's when we will have public comments specifically for the ordinance. Alternatively, the committee may decide, as we're sitting here today, that you've raised some issues that they want to consider, and we'll consider it next year. And then the whole process will start again, being that we'll do a first reading, then there'll be notice, and then there'll be a second reading if we decide to go forward with this particular ordinance. You following me?
Yes, and you know what? The holiday season's really terrible for people to come to these kinds of activities, these kinds of events. I came here today because, and I skipped my kid's holiday concert, which you guys know, but it's because I can't make it on the 18th.
I understand.
So, I just don't understand why it's so hurried,
Thank you.
right?
Okay.
I realize you guys have much bigger
No,
issues to deal with,
it's
and my
not
issue is
any
very
bigger.
small,
No, it's no
but it
bigger.
matters to me.
You know what, it's no bigger an issue or smaller an issue than other issues, that's number one. And number two, we appreciate you coming out, we do. And we wanna hear what people have to say about every issue that's important to them as they are, as they are residents of the township. So, yes,
Sorry, can I just chime in
Sure.
real quick? Just as, for the township committee as well, that we will share the data, now that's been introduced with the town, with the residents of the area, tomorrow. So that they have it, can review it, and also we'd be willing to set up a meeting in the interim, again, and certainly we'll move at the pace that the committee is comfortable with, based on the public discussion or public comment, or whatever you want to do. But certainly would put that, extend that forward to explain what's been found here.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Brett Cohn, 19 Wyndham Road, nearby the stated intersection. First, I want to thank the Township Committee for taking this issue seriously. This has been a safety concern for years, so it's not been rushed by any stretch of the imagination. It's been something that I've heard mentioned for years now, and just a common sense solution, a low-cost common sense solution. And I think we'd all agree that even if it saves one life, it's worth it. So I think my dear neighbors, some of my dear neighbors, who acknowledge that the safety concerns in this intersection, and will readily acknowledge the safety concerns, are concerned about and have gotten excited about the possibility that their street would become a cut-through, and people trying to avoid that four-way stop, that intersection. Frankly, I don't think the concern is realistic, because it would be completely inconvenient to go in that direction. It would only be relevant for people who are turning right on Hobart up of Highland. So, and I frankly think if somebody were to go to that length to use their street as a cut-through, and that became a problem, there are ways to remedy that, including what I've seen used in other areas that have four-way stops, such as a speed bump on the street that you want to discourage people using as a cut-through. So I think if that's the true concern that the folks on Wells have, or some folks on Wells have, I think it can be readily addressed. And honestly, I think that adding 2 stop signs to that intersection, which is a low-cost alternative, could also be easily undone if it turns out to be a problem. And so you can imagine every possible traffic control that may be used could have some consequences, and I think that has to be thought through. And I think the township has done the right thing by engaging a consultant to do so. So I commend the committee. I won't take up much more of your time. I just want to say that, I would encourage us not to be, stuck in sort of a analysis paralysis here. It's time to do something and get some solutions, put in place. So with that, I'll end my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was quick. Josh Scharf, 11 Hawthorne Road. Solution for you, Jackie. Most towns have a rooming house ordinance, and I don't think we have one, and it's something that's worth looking into. I have a couple of issues. One of them is an issue with a solution. How often does that come around? One of my daughters moved home between apartments, and I had to drive her to the Short Hills station. Making that left turn under the train trestle on Short Hills Avenue, you take your life into your hands because you don't know what's coming. And the same thing on Chatham Road. And I've dealt with this kind of situation before when I was dealing professionally. And we would put in a convex mirror on one side and the other side so one can actually see the traffic coming one way or the other. It could be I think they run $154.38. I don't know if the town could swing it, but a couple of those strategically placed on both sides of those underpass could help people and avoid. I have no empirical data in terms of how many accidents are there, but it might be worth looking, and I could certainly leave this over here with you, Alex. You may recall that back in September I came down here because with a couple of my neighbors, because there's a house at 28 Whitney that was partially demolished back in June. The homeowner or the property owner had dug a pit which filled with water and created a mosquito nuisance for everybody in the area, and they just left it. And you might recall the photograph is this. The photograph of it is that. Okay. Sam, can you see that?
Barely.
Barely. Okay. So the photograph of it is that, which is a half demolished building. So today, 3 months later, that was in the beginning of September, we have the same building, and you could see better sky, right, in this photograph, but essentially nothing's been done. And it remains the same. The owner evidently owns 4 properties in town. And I have to kind of characterize him as a real estate speculator than anything else. Now, where I come from, which is New York, it's not unheard of somebody buying a property and then intentionally creating a mess, you know, buying a multifamily house and bringing drug addicts and prostitutes to kind of devalue the property and then grabbing them up around them. I'm not saying this is the case, but, you know, if I was a cynical person, I would consider that to be a possibility. Back 3 months ago, we talked about that the town has in code ordinances for property maintenance. And in fact, Elaine Becker, who was here earlier, had drafted that ordinance specifically, and I spoke with her, for these kind of situations because, you know, not exact situation, but situations where homeowners would just let their property go and it affected quality of life as well as the values of abutting properties, of properties in the area. And it really, with property like this, driving through, it's right down the street, it's tough to sell a property. If you're refinancing, it affects it. So this is becoming 3 months later, nothing. We're talking now about 6 months of a partially demolished property, and nothing's happening. The remedy, as we spoke about 3 months ago, was a $2,000 a day penalty to the property owner. And I don't know, I doubt that the town has exercised that option. But you know, it's ridiculous. The other thing, and I want to bring this to your attention, is that according to the Appraisal Institute, a property that if there's a persistent odor or overgrown yard or partially demolished, does devalue the adjacent homes by up to 10%. So, you know, if the town isn't going to be doing anything about this, the very least you could do is take a look at our pocket over there. You know where we are, Whitney Road, Hawthorne Road, and adjust our property taxes 10% lower to reflect the values. Because you're not doing anything about it, and you're certainly empowered to do something about this. So, you know, consider one way or another. Either you act upon this owner, and I could certainly provide you his name if you don't have it. His wife is a realtor with Keller Williams. I would say that they know what they're doing. So I would encourage the town to either find them or look at the 90-something properties in that pocket and reduce our property taxes by 10% to reflect the actual values based upon a dilapidated house that's been sitting there for 6 months. So it's your option. I hope somebody gets back to me with a solution. But I think 6 months, we've shown enormous amounts of patience. And Sam knows my great tendency to harass and annoy people. I haven't been here for 3 months, right? So let's do something. Please get back to me. Tell me what you're going to do. I'd love to see 10% off my taxes if I have to look at this pile of crap every morning. Okay? Thank you.
Good evening, Phil Kirsch, 93 Cedar Street. I have a few short things. Mr. Levy, you had mentioned a court settlement for the the suit that was brought against the town by two people, and that the judgment, I think it was later pretty much dismissed, and the
It wasn't a
judgment.
settlement, it was a decision, court
Decision.
decision. Yeah.
Excuse me, and it was, and in that case brought against the town, was that, for the record, what did that cost the town in legal fees?
And legal fees?
Yeah,
$160,000.
$160,000 for a suit that just was, what was the word? It was,
For a lawsuit that was dismissed by the Superior Court.
a suit that was dismissed, $160,000, thank you. I'd like to say secondly that I was disappointed that the Township Committee did not have information on the interest figures or counsel fees for the bonds that were being discussed tonight. Although I do feel it's appropriate that the new committee that will be constituted will have a fresh start, and whatever they decide to do with what we think will be a new majority, they can get their plan, they can get their money, they can get their support from the people in the town, mandate or not, and go ahead and take full responsibility for what happens after that. I would like to address something that Committeewoman Eglo said, because when she told us, when she thanked her constituents who have come here for 3 years to address issues with the town, I wish she also would have considered, she kind of showed her hand, because she should have considered residents like me who have come here for 10 years or more. And we may not applaud her speeches, and we may not be as loud and discordant as her supporters, but she does represent us, because whether or not we voted for her, she did get elected, and we are residents. And it is not just me, but all those people who, whether they voted for her or not, she now represents. We accept that she represents us, and I hope that she would also recognize that. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we're gonna,
Move to adjourn.
no, we're gonna close the public session. The motion is not accepted at the moment, however, we
It
are
could
gonna
be
close.
seconded. It could be a second. You don't have the authority to unilaterally.
Okay, you're right. Second,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we're adjourned.
Diane, what?
We were gonna discuss further.
You were gonna discuss,
But